Live series?
So I was really inspired to do the IG Live series when I saw a lot of people utilizing, the Instagram live function where you could go live with someone else. And at the beginning of quarantine, we saw a lot of people do interviews and, Versus was coming out. And I saw how people were utilizing the tool and really enjoying it. And I went back and forth about doing it, but once I was working with 24 Megabytes, aka Bryce, on his song Devil at Your Door, I was on the remix to that, which was such a fun process. And, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have been on that song. Once we did that and the song was coming out and his EP was coming out, I was just like, hey, why don't we do like an IG Live together and kind of discuss the song, discuss your project? It'll be a way to kind of start the promotional process. And he was really down for it. It was a lot of fun. And before that, anyone who knows me knows I like to be prepared. I like to have everything together. So I wrote up some questions, we discussed them, and when we started, it really kind of fell into this Q&A conversation kind of flow. And once it was done and I watched it, I just really, really enjoyed it. And I thought to myself, I said, I already knew a few people who I could potentially do it with if I wanted to. And so I had a little bit of a model. We'd have so many questions, and I would reach out, and once we had a conversation about what they were comfortable talking about, I would make sure they had the questions in advance, because that was important to me too, just knowing that someone felt prepared. They didn't feel on the spot. They didn't feel like they were getting hit with, anything that they weren't expecting. I wanted it to be a safe space. I wanted it to be something that they could be comfortable in, especially because it's live. And so then I started reaching out to some people who I knew through the industry, through the entertainment industry, and they were all really excited and really down to do it. So after Bryce's interview, I got to interview Words with Michelle, and that's a blogger slash podcaster who has done several blogs on me. So being able to kind of repay the favor and interview her after she's interviewed me so many times was really, really cool. And then we had Denise McLeod, who is an Indigenous comedian who I've met at events, and she's always been so sweet to me, so supportive. And I thought it would be a great way for us to connect again. So she was really open to it. We had a great time. And then after that, it just started rolling out with different people I knew, different people who were seeing the series. And I had an idea of certain people I wanted, and then additional people would come up. People would recommend that I interview this person or that person. And it really just kind of took on a life of its own. And before I knew it, it was something we were doing every week, and we had a guest, and it was really an amazing experience. And it was something really cool that I was able to do during quarantine and during COVID, that outside of that, I probably wouldn't have been able to do it during the time slot that we assigned to it. So it really showcased something that I was able to do that I wasn't expecting. And I really, really enjoyed that. So I had an amazing time. That was an amazing experience for me. It's definitely not done. We just have other things we're working on right now, but it was so much fun.
Great. So I was particularly intrigued by Nadine Ryan, one of your guests, when she spoke of putting works of process or progress, she put it, out there for her audience to consume. And I thought that was interesting because it's so rare that artists are willing or vulnerable enough to put out a less than finished product, and audiences are rarely privy to that process. So I like that approach to her art, and what artists watching this series could take away from that. So what interesting tidbits or lessons have you taken from particular guests that you've interviewed?
I think Nadine Ryan's a great example, because I think that vulnerability, as you said, I think it's so important. I think it's amazing. I think we live in times as well where people want to see the process now. There was a time where people just wanted the music. They just wanted to see the final product. And that's kind of all you really got. And now we're living in times where everything is so live. There's so many ways for people to see what you're doing in the studio or doing in a area where you're doing art. You know what I mean? I've seen the process with other artists who are doing murals, where they document that process and you get to see it live. And I think it's really important to show that, because sometimes people have an idea of what artists do in any disciplinary, and that can either encourage them or discourage them from, trying to get into that craft, because they only see the final product, or they only see the highlight reel, and they think, how can I ever get there? And not know that every single artist has their own trials and tribulations to go through. Every artist has challenges that they face when it comes to releasing their art, putting out their art. I've had very humble beginnings with my music. I wasn't always recording in a studio. I wasn't always recording with a really good mic. So everyone has their road to success and their road to just like finding ways to make it work for them. So I think when you see that process, I think that's really important, and you kind of get to take a lot away from it. And I think it's inspiring to people. I think they're like, oh, wow, so you have to go through all of this. Oh, I can do that too. Or, wow, now I know kind of what that looks like. I didn't know before. So getting that insight, I think, is really important. In terms of other lessons and stuff that I've learned, I think just being really aware of the times, being aware of everything that's going on. I had guests on that were around the times where a lot of stuff was going on with Black Lives Matter, and I really wanted to be representative even for myself as an Afro-Indigenous person, but also for other guests that were coming on that were Black and identifying as Black and going through that process, and then having to come on and we're having this conversation about other things. I wanted to always make sure that I was really aware. I understand that there's a lot of strife, there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of stuff that's happened to Black and Indigenous and people of color. And so when it comes to the work that I'm doing in this specific kind of arena, I always want to make sure I'm really, really conscious, not just how I feel, but how my guests feel and how they're navigating these spaces and how they have to continue navigating these spaces just like I do. So how are we making sure that this is a comfortable environment? How am I making sure that I'm aware of what's going on with the people I'm working with, so that way we can all have the best time, and we can also kind of take away a lot, and people watching can kind of see the real impacts of the things that we're talking about. So that was really important. That was something I learned because this was something that I was doing during during a time, I feel all time is like this, but during a time where there was just a lot being highlighted that needed to be highlighted, and recognizing how that could affect the people I was working with.
Great. So I think an underlying theme of your IG Live series is the importance of networking and staying connected with your peers, as you've clearly done. So do you have any advice on how to network successfully, especially for artists who are not only just starting out and not knowing how to really go about that, but especially during COVID-19 when it's not so easy to connect with people and it's easy to feel isolated and kind of stay in that kind of space? You touched on it before, but do you want to elaborate a bit?
Yeah, no, I think we're really lucky that we live in times where there's so many ways to connect with people, and a lot of free ways if you have internet. So there's just a lot of ways to either connect with people virtually via, Zoom and FaceTime, or you can DM people, or you can, there's a lot of different, like even house party, where you can play games. And I've done that with, a group of friends that I have. And there's Netflix parties that my besties and I engage in on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. So there's so many ways to connect. I think it's important to find what works for you, what you're comfortable with, what works with whatever boundaries you have. Staying involved with communities that you're involved with, so art communities, online boards, whatever you're kind of connected and kind of in the loop with, making sure that you're finding something that you can do to still be connected in the world, because it can be very isolating, as you said. And I think sometimes with everything going on, it can kind of catch up on you before you realize. So you could be thinking, oh, I'm fine and I can be by myself and I'm not really considering all of this other stuff and I'm fine. But then over time, you can kind of see how it can kind of affect your psyche, and that can be really hard. So before it gets to that point, making sure you're finding ways to connect with people, either on a weekly basis, if you have someone you can text, someone you can chat with. Also connecting with yourself, though, at the same time, and finding ways to look within, whether that be something like meditation, working out, self-care, self-love. There's a lot of really cool activities, even if it's something like coloring, on the adult coloring books. There's so many different ways to connect with the world and connect with yourself. So making sure that you're taking advantage of all of those that you can, because even though this is a time and we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, so making sure that you're centered and you're stabilized and you're grounded today, I think goes a long way.
Awesome. And what's your ultimate goal for this series?
I would really like to continue interviewing people. There's some people I have on my wish list that I would like to interview. So fingers crossed, prayers up for that. There's some people who I would really, really like to interview, really like to get their thoughts on certain things. And be able to do so in like a safe space, like do so in a way where they can feel supported, they can feel safe. This is not like, let's get something for clickbait, you know what I mean? They'll deal with that in other scenarios and situations. Something where we can have a safe, candid conversation, and it can feel really friendly and really lifelike. And one thing I got from doing a lot of the Instagram lives was people would say like, oh, just the way you interview, like it's really friendly and people have a good time and it's really relaxed and it's really chill. I like that, and I would want someone else to feel that way. So ultimately I want to keep doing it. We are again kind of taking a break right now to focus on other projects that I'm working on, but when I do start that up again, there's definitely some people I have in mind, some people I want to interview, and I want to keep it going and I want to see where it goes. And I definitely want to open it up to on new platforms where we don't have restrictions. Like with Instagram Live, we have like the hour, which is a good time. But if there's ways we can have different kinds of conversations and I can kind of control that a bit more, and we can have different backgrounds and we can really play with it and see where we can go with it, I would really like to do that. And also potentially do work for a company that does things like that, you know, and be part of some type of online or televised platform where people are being interviewed and having conversations and discussions on different topics. I think that would definitely be something I would be interested in doing.